Hey guys, um, so we're talking about motivation, and in this chapter we've included equity theory. It's a little bit ironic because if you think about equity theory, this is when you make a comparison between the outcome input ratio that you perceive as true in your life circumstances to someone else, someone who you select. They're called a referent or a comparison other. It's a motivation theory, only kind of in part, because most motivation theories would predict when you will be motivated, but this theory really has implications for when mostly you won't be motivated. So I say that because you might presume that this is true. If you feel like things are equitable, you are motivated, and if you think that things are not equitable, you will not be motivated. But I think it works a little differently than that. I think it works like this. When you think that things are inequitable, you are unmotivated. That's very upsetting to us when you perceive that someone who's a comparable other for the same amount of inputs they provide to the organization gets greater outcomes. On the other hand, when you feel like you're in a positive inequity, which is where the outcomes that you receive outweigh the inputs that you invest, the talent, experience, knowledge, so forth that you contribute to the job are compensated more per unit than other people. When you perceive it like that, it's a simple analogy would be you went to the grocery store and you gave them a $10 bill for your bill, and they were to give you $2 in return as change. They gave you $3, more than you were even expecting, more than you think that you are due. That's a positive inequity. The thing is, that doesn't motivate us in the work environment or in our lives in general. Inequities really upset us terribly. That would be like supposed to get $3 back in change, and I only got 2. We don't let those slide. Those are very salient to us. We're very cognizant, very aware of those, very sensitive to those inequities. But when a circumstance comes where we're overcompensated, somehow it doesn't have a very strong positive effect on us, not a very lasting effect. I guess we figure for all the inequities that we've endured in our life, it's about time we get an extra buck here and there. If you think about it, for every time you compare yourself to someone unfavorably, in other words, you make a comparison in your life to someone else, and you feel like you're being gypped, essentially, there's many people in this world who would look at your life circumstances compared to theirs and think that you have favor. In fact, I don't remember the exact statistic or what year that I read this, but at some point I had read that there were 2/3 of the entire world's population live without footwear, without shoes. So literally, there are many people in this world that would like to be in your shoes. But we don't live with that constant reminder of that. In the United States, we're very privileged. Well, we don't recognize it. We don't live like we have that kind of privilege. We actually live quite the opposite. We're always looking upward. We're always looking at someone who seems to have more than we do and wondering why life is so unfair. Well, I think that's the reality of the situation, is that life isn't fair. And probably you had a mom or a dad or a grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle or someone who loved you that told you that. Life isn't fair. I think, though, even though most of us were told that and understood that there'll be times when life isn't fair, what we never were told and never quite understood, and it's time, I think, that we do, is that life isn't going to get fair. Not when you grow up, not when you're married, not when you have kids, not when you make $100,000 or $200,000, not when your car's paid off and your mortgage, not when your kids are done with college. It never changes. There are constant inequities that we can perceive throughout our entire life, and they make us very unhappy if we allow them. It sounds like a self-serving thing to advocate, but to make ourselves happier, we really need to stop the cycle of making comparisons between ourselves and others. Now, as a manager, when we're managing the expectations of others, of employees, equity theory doesn't give us a lot, I think, of constructive outcomes, of constructive mechanisms to address that. Because when someone feels like they're being treated unfairly, and we as managers come alongside them and counsel with them and talk with them about it, we're coming at it from a disadvantage, quite a disadvantage, because the person, after all, because they're already perceiving inequity, is probably not very open to changing who their referent is, or changing their perception of the skills and values that the other person brings to the table, or even changing their comparison altogether. They're already emotionally upset, because anytime you take $1 from someone, they feel like they've been stolen from. And so to be in that position is difficult to counsel someone out of. But I think there are stronger lessons for us in our own lives. If you want to live a life with a greater sense of satisfaction and joy for the things that you do and you are blessed to have, starting point is just to realize there are many, many people in this world who would love to stand in your shoes.